right, here he is. I mean, this is our guy, our buddy James Rapien. We talked about you can catch him on a regular basis, of course, covering everything that is the Cincinnati Bengals, and we appreciate him joining us regularly. Sports Illustrated's AllBengals.com, Locked On Bengals podcasts. All right, Mr. Rapien, first of all, how are you? How's everybody at home with your little infant daughter? Everybody okay?
Yeah, everyone's good to go. We're living the dream here, monitoring Bengals free agency. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. Lacrosse season is up and running for the mighty Marymount Warriors, and so we're off to a 2-0 start. So all's right with the world. All right. Now, let me ask you this. Let's start with this Jonah Williams thing. You reported earlier today that there are a number of teams, correct me if I misspoke there, that are at least engaged currently with the Bengals about a potential trade. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, well, Ian, I'll love to take the credit, but Ian Rappaport was the one that reported it. But yes, and that's not shocking, right? That there are teams interested in Jonah Williams. But the question is, what are they willing to pay? Because if they're willing to pay that $12.6 million that he's set to make in guaranteed money, then I don't think that the Bengals are going to fetch what they want in return for him. And that's kind of been my stance the entire time. But who knows? The left tackle market, the thing that was so surprising about the Orlando Brown Jr. signing wasn't just the fact that the Bengals spent huge money and $31 million up front, all of those things, to get a left tackle. It's that he was far and away the best left tackle on the market. There was no one even close. And now you look at who's remaining at left tackle, and Jonah Williams is right there as the best guy that could potentially be available. The problem is it's a guaranteed contract. You can't necessarily sign him for a multi-year deal, and you have to give up an asset to do so. Now, you could extend him if you're another team, and I'm sure that's what Jonah wants is an extension and the ability to play left tackle and all of those things. We'll see what happens, but not shocked that there's a report that teams are interested, but what are they willing to offer? Because I think that the Bengals value Jonah Williams more than, say, most viewers and most Bengals fans do.
Okay, well, but let me help me with a couple of things because I know that in baseball, for example, you can do this kind of thing. I'm curious if you can do it in football. Without getting too deep in the weeds on it, because, I'm not smart enough. My eyes start rolling around in the back of my head. But if you want to make a deal for a player and you owe him $12.5 million, could the Bengals say, based on what you just said, if another team's going to pick up $12.5, can the Bengals pay half of the $12.5? The other team pay,
Sure.
And now you might expect to get something back in return as opposed to a team that takes on all $12.5? Can you do it that way?
Sure. So let's say a team offers, a fourth rounder and they're willing to take all 12.6, but the Bengals wanted to pay part of that and eat some of that salary to get a second rounder instead. They could do that. And that's the interesting part of this is Jonah's already accounted for. And so shedding the 12.6 sounds great, but imagine if you could shed 7.6 and get the 63rd pick in the draft. That's interesting. That's something I would be open to. And that's one of the many layers that goes into this. I think another part of it is if you're the Bengals and you're negotiating with Foster Moreau, let's say, or you're negotiating with some of these other free agents, maybe you're waiting to decide, and I'm sure you might ask me about Joe Mixon, but waiting to decide if you're going to be able to unload Jonah Williams before you finalize a deal with a guy like Foster Moreau. And you maybe you're getting that deal done, but it's just a matter of who's going to go. Is it Jonah? Is it Joe? Is it both? Is it one? Are you restructuring Mixon? I think there's a lot of balls that are potentially in the air right now and a lot of uncertainty. So we'll see. I also wouldn't be surprised if the Bengals are like, yeah, Jonah's our right tackle. We're not going to get anything of substance for him of what we value, because I think they would have a second round pick asking price on him. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I'm purely speculating, but my thought is get a 3 for Jonah. And so if I value him as a third round pick, I think the Bengals would move it up around and want a second round pick. I'm not sure if that's true, but that's how I think they would operate.
Okay. I want to ask you, though, one more question about Williams, because I've been highly critical of him on this show ever since the team signed Orlando Brown Jr. to be the left tackle, and Williams promptly asking for a trade. Now, this is a franchise that drafted him number one. They've paid him a lot of money. They're paying him $12.5 million. And I know all of it doesn't come down to money, but I also understand Williams' standpoint. I've called the guy a gamer. When he had the first knee injury, he didn't miss a snap. He came right back. And, he tried to play through it at the end. It didn't happen. That's fine. Guys get hurt. I get it. And I also get he wants to be paid like a left tackle instead of a right tackle, so he wants to continue playing left tackle, and this is the final year of his deal. Okay, that's all fine. But were you a little surprised that all of a sudden now you have a chance if you're Jonah Williams? You played in back-to-back. Well, he didn't play, but your team has played in back-to-back AFC championship games. You played in one Super Bowl. And now by just moving over for 1 year to right tackle, you're giving your chance a team to potentially win a Super Bowl, and he wants out of town. Your thoughts on that?
I was a bit surprised for a few reasons. One, Jawan Taylor was a right tackle, and he got paid to be a left tackle more than Orlando Brown, right? The 4-year, $80 million deal. Mike McGlinchey, who's really comparable to a guy like Jonah Williams, not huge stature-wise, former first-rounder, all of those things, was picked a few picks earlier and a year earlier, Mike McGlinchey was. But he got paid too. It was 5 years, $87.5 million to play right tackle. And if you're Jonah, what an opportunity it is to prove yourself. And so that's why I think ultimately, when it comes down to it, if the Bengals don't get what they're asking for, they're not going to just give Jonah Williams away, because he has every reason in the world, not just 12.6 million reasons, but maybe 60, 80 million reasons. Because if he comes in and plays well, the best football of his career, Thom, which is sort of realistic. I know people are down on Jonah. He's 25 years old. He had that knee procedure to make sure that his kneecap doesn't dislocate again and come out of place. And usually that's a pretty successful procedure. So let's say that happens. He'll be playing alongside Alex Kappa, who's by far the guy, the best lineman he would have played next to throughout his career. And he would be on the best line he's ever been on throughout his career. And he would be in a contract year. So, yeah, you have to switch positions. But he was really versatile at Alabama. That's part of the reason why, if you're the Bengals, you bring him in 11th overall in 2019, is you could move him around. You felt like he could be a left tackle, but you could move him around. And so you make that switch, you play at a high level, and you are going to get paid. And so I think that if the worst case is make $12.6 million, play on a contender, that's a pretty good worst case, because you're going to have a chance to really cash in next offseason. I know that might not be what he wants, and I know his ego's probably saying, no, I'm a left tackle and I want to get paid like a left tackle. I get it. I understand it. At the same time, I think that he could really cash in next offseason if he plays well for the Bengals or for anyone this year.
Well, the other thing guys I think sometimes forget is, look, we all know the NFL is a marketing machine. It is what it is. It's the king of the jungle, all that kind of stuff. But, when your team starts playing deep in the playoffs, like the Bengals have done the last 2 years, potentially with a chance to do it again this year, and as you just point out, he goes over to right tackle, and I'm with you all the way. I haven't phoned it in on this guy. I mean, like you said, for all the reasons, right? He's tough. He cares. He's been a good player here. Not a great player, but a good player. But the marketing, as far as just, and I don't mean marketing dollars, but I'm just saying as far as getting yourself front and center, playing in the biggest games, whether it's during the regular season, and the Bengals are going to be in prime time all the time again this coming year, at least the max number you're allowed to be, no doubt about that. Then the games in the playoffs with, 15, 20, 30 million people watching the game, whatever it might. Every team in the NFL, and Collinsworth and Aikman, all these guys are going to be talking about how great Jonah Williams is playing at right tackle. It's all right there in front of them. So just say, I want to be here. I want to win a Super Bowl. And if you cut bait at the end of the year, you cut bait at the end of the year. All right. Let's get to.
And ultimately, I think that's what will happen if they don't move him. I think he will report, play, be in camp, all of those things.
Okay. But if you were a betting man, is he here or gone when training camp starts?
He's here.
Okay. Joe Mixon. Now, this is another one for me where, you hear everybody and his brother screaming, get Mixon out of town, get Mixon out of town. Okay, fine. And everybody has their opinion, and they're entitled to their opinion. We're all about free speech here on the program. But this guy has been a good player. At times has been a great player for this franchise. I know you can go back and you can say, okay, well, last year in the championship game, P. Ryan got more snaps, better pass blocker, et cetera, et cetera. Mixon can run it. He can catch it. He may not be a great blocker. You can find somebody to block in certain third down situations if that's what you want to do. When you look at his situation, and help me here again a little bit, James, because you're the expert, I'm not. The Bengals go into the draft. Are they looking for a running back in the draft?
Oh, yeah. Regardless of Mixon. I think regardless of Joe Mixon and whether or not he's on the roster this year, you have Mixon, Travion Williams, Chris Evans. You lost a key part of your running back room with Samaje Perine, and you need to get younger there. You just do. Mixon was drafted in 2017 and he has logged a lot of carries and I had a lot of receptions, right? Was really good catching the ball out of the backfield last year. You need someone behind him. And even if you sign another veteran, I think that they will draft a running back partially because of the need roster-wise. And the other part of this is how deep and talented of a class this is. This is the time to cash in on a running back. And he might not start, which the Bengals have a history of doing. When they drafted Giovanni Bernard with the 38th overall pick, I want to say, but second round in 2013, well, he wasn't just the bell cow guy. They had Ben Jarvis Green Ellis for another year. In 2014, they draft Jeremy Hill, and a few years later, that had worn thin. But guess what? He was still on the roster for that fourth season. They didn't trade him to clear the way for Joe Mixon. He was still there. And so I think they like the idea of having a veteran and also having a young guy. And I think they wanted that to be Samaje Perine, and he opted to go to Denver. And so it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Joe Mixon, if they keep him, if they still draft a running back, sign a different veteran to replace Mixon. I'm not sure how they do it, but they certainly, I would be shocked if they don't draft a running back, and probably pretty early, given their track record.
Okay, well, but look, there are two things about Mixon here, okay? I mentioned he's been a productive player. He seems to be well-liked in the locker room. He's a player that plays with a lot of passion and a lot of fire and seems to genuinely care about how his teammates do when he's on the field and in the locker room. We also know, while not officially in any major trouble off the field, there have been a couple of incidents here, so it seems like the Bengals hold almost all the leverage on this thing. You know Mixon. You've been around Mixon. You know the people in charge running the Bengals. Do you think when all is said and done, Mixon takes a pay cut and stays here for 2023?
I think that would be wise. I think that would be best for all parties, because as of now, even if Mixon is on the roster this year at his current number, which I still think is less likely than it is likely, that's it. It's a lame duck year. You will not be back in 2024. If you take a pay cut or some kind of team-friendly restructure, which a lot of different things could happen, but a pay cut makes the most sense, which doesn't mean he wouldn't make the money that he's due, by the way, which I can get into in a second. If you do that, I think it gives you a chance to be in Cincinnati past the 2023 season. And what I mean by pay cut is the Bengals could, instead of him bringing home $10 million this year, say, let's lower this to $6 million. Your base salary is $6 million, and give you a couple incentives if you rush for 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns, which he did both of those things in 2021. Mm-hmm. If you do those things, you'll get $2 million for each, and you'll get to that $10 million again. And it saves them cap room because it's an incentive-based deal that he didn't hit in 2022. So he's unlikely to hit those numbers technically because he didn't do it already this past season. So basically, they could split the difference almost, give Mixon a chance to earn everything that's coming to him and keep him around. And so there's certainly a path to him returning. The big question for me, Thom, it isn't Mixon the leader. It isn't Mixon the locker room presence, or even the pass catcher or the runner. I like all of those things. I think he's still a really good player. We saw the 5 touchdown game, all of those things. But this is a Super Bowl contending team. This is a pass first team that the past 2 years, with the game on the line, Joe Mixon has been on the sidelines. Mm-hmm. And I think that has to do with pass blocking. So can you say, all right, a $12.7 million cap hit for a guy that we can't get on the field when it is time to go win the game?
Yep.
That part is what I keep coming back to. I like Joe. Fans think that, at least some, that it's some personal thing. It's not. I'm going to have to go look Joe in the eye after saying everything that I've said if he's still on the team. And I'm comfortable with that because I would love for him to be around. I just think when you look at the resources that they're giving to number 28, when you have guys like 85 and 9 and 55 looking for extensions and more coming next year, it's tough to say that it's worth it. And so we'll see if they can work something out. It would be cool if they did. It would also be cool if he was able to take that next step as a pass blocker, which I think is the big reason why he hasn't been out there late in games.
Well, I mean, physically, there's no reason he can't. I mean, to me,
I
don't know if it's
physically he's bigger than P. Ryan and
absolutely.
Dominant,
I
yes.
mean, it's. I think that has to be a question of want. I draw the analogy of: do you want in basketball to guard somebody? Do you want to rebound? Mixon wants to carry it. He wants to catch it. He wants to win. But part of winning also is: are you willing? Is there the want to pass block and be good at it?
Well,
hadn't shown it.
Well,
not yet, anyway.
Yeah, real quick. I think the want might be there too. It's hard. Mentally, it's tough. You might have every physical trait in the world and have the work ethic and all of those things, but this Bengals offense is not 2015 Bengals offense or 2018 Bengals offense where it's just one audible and that's it. You know, teams are trying to get after Joe and they're going to be creative and they know they're passing it. Joe Burrow, that is. And so pass blocking is tough and there's a huge mental aspect to it as well.
Joined by James Rapien of Sports Illustrated's AllBengals.com and Locked On Bengals, a podcast he does. You'll always want to check those out. Okay, a couple more topics I want to cover here with you. Knowing what we know about the Mixon thing, we've talked about that. Knowing what we know about the Jonah Williams thing, we're talking about that. Mm-hmm. Okay, you mentioned some of the extension stuff. Is and are all of those things affecting their ability to sign Moreau or another free agent tight end?
I don't know. I think, well, one, no. They have the room right now, but they may want to get one of these moves done before inking Moreau. And maybe that's what it is, because it just feels something's got to happen, right? It's felt like that for a few days now. And that seems like a perfect fit. A 25-year-old tight end that knows Joe Burrow joining a Super Bowl contender. And the Saints aren't that. I get there's familiarity there with Derek Carr. But the two teams in on Moreau seem to be the Saints and the Bengals. The tight end market is down. The past two tight ends that have played for the Bengals and started and played significant snaps have gotten paid. So if you're Moreau, maybe you just want a one-year deal with Cincinnati. Maybe they want a multi-year deal. I'm not sure. They have the money to sign him now. But maybe it is a comfort thing where they want some of these other, situations to work themselves out before. But I think it's such a perfect fit, Tom, because he's not going to break the bank to where you can't draft a tight end even as early as 28 in the first round. But he's going to give you a proven guy with some familiarity that could be entering his prime and about to play his best ball to play alongside Joe Burrow. So if a cornerback is there at 28 or the right defensive player is there at 28, defensive end or defensive lineman, you don't have to reach for a tight end. Maybe you don't get a tight end till round 4. And the Bengals realized how unpredictable it was drafting at the end of rounds last year. I think that was pretty frustrating for them in their war room. So to me, getting a guy like Moreau, it would calm things down a bit because I do expect a lot of tight ends to start flying off the board. It's hard to find guys that can run, catch, block, have the size, all of those things. And there's a bunch of them in this draft. And it wouldn't shock me if a lot of them go before the Bengals can pick either 28th or 60th. And maybe they don't want to take a tight end that early anyway. So giving them Foster Moreau would certainly help in that department.
All right. Last thing for me, and Casey has a question for you here, real quick. Look, everybody and his brother does a mock draft. The one I read this morning was from The Athletic. And they have DeJuan Jones out of Ohio State, a right tackle, being chosen by the Bengals at 28. His name is frequently mentioned. A monster, 6'9", 335, whatever he is, maybe bigger than that. Do you think, when all's said and done, that's what they do, or will that be predicated upon what happens between now and draft day with Jonah Williams?
It's interesting because I could totally see a scenario where the Bengals almost have an agreement in place, but with Jonah and a potential destination, but they want to see if they get Jones or Darnell Wright or the Anton Harrison.
Interesting.
And those are the three where on draft night, let's say you get one of those guys at 28th. Well, now, of course, you're willing to move Jonah. And do they want to wait that long? I'm not sure, but that's certainly a possibility. I wouldn't rule that out. And you mentioned Jones. Can you imagine the marketing of the Twin Towers?
Yeah.
You got Jones at right tackle, 6'8", 6'9", Orlando Brown Jr. at left tackle. That's the shirts, the signs, the posters they make themselves. But yeah, I think they would certainly be in on it. And of these tackles, I love Darnell Wright from Tennessee. 330 plus pounds, tested great at the combine, played great. I think he'll be a plug and play right tackle. That said, I get people love DeJuan Jones, and I think he'd be great as well. And, if any of those guys there, Harrison, Jones, Wright, I think it's tough to pass on any of those three because it's going to be really hard to find that type of prospect later in the draft. And if one of them are there at 28, it would make sense even if Jonah Williams is around in 2023 because it is a one-year deal. And I would be pretty surprised if he's back in 2024.
Casey, you had something before we let James go?
Yeah. James, I just seeing what the market for the tight ends has become with Gesicki getting a $9 million one-year deal, Schultz getting a one-year $9 million deal. Foster Moreau can't be too expensive for them to already give him a contract, right? I mean, just logically thinking, I don't know what his value is, but it can't be more than $7 million a year, right? And they have $17 million in cap space. I just don't understand why they haven't made. I get maybe wanting to wait for the move to see where Jonah goes, or if you have to cut Joe. It makes me think that maybe they've already got a plan for Joe Burrow and T. Higgins to maybe get those extensions done this year as well. I don't know if maybe that's the same thought or.
And that's the part of it with the cap space is that goes really quickly. It'll be like roughly $5 million for their rookie class right now in cap room. So that goes down to 14 quickly. You'll have a few other things. Basically right now, I'd say they have right around, and my co-host on Locked On Bengals, Jake Lisco, follows this much closer than I do, but just under 10. After things that are inevitable that are going to happen that aren't reflected right now, $10 million in cap room. But you're right, that's still room for Moreau. But that room goes quickly if you plan on extending Burrow in the near future, if you want to work something out with T. Higgins. And so that's the dilemma with a Jonah Williams. Clearing that money, it would make a lot of sense and it would make it much easier. And that's also the dilemma with Joe Mixon and bringing him back at his current number. And so you could free up a heck of a lot of money. I mean, if you traded Jonah and you just renegotiated with Mixon and saved $4 million on his cap hit, you're talking about 16 plus million, which would free up some things. So I know they're working, and it's interesting that nothing's happened over the past few days. So I think something will. And the Moreau, the fact that he's still out there is interesting. Does he want a one-year deal? Does he want a multi-year deal? I look at Hayden Hurst's contract with the Panthers, 3 years, roughly $21 million. I don't think the Bengals want to go up to $7 million per. I mean, Mike Gesicki was like $4.5 million guaranteed, and incentives will get him up to $9 million if he hits those incentives with the Patriots. That was a pretty team-friendly deal. And so if the fact that the Bengals weren't in on him, Moreau makes a lot of sense to me, and maybe they can get a multi-year deal done. Because if they do that, then they can alleviate that cap hit this year and push it into next season and maybe the 2025 year.
And then my last question is, if they do decide to trade Jonah and they get that $12 million, is it just then that they're going to probably re-sign or extend Joe and and T, or is there maybe another free agent out there that we just haven't thought of yet? I know it's kind of bare bones now that we're in kind of like the third wave, fourth wave here, but is there anyone else out there that maybe you heard of, or any rumor mill, anything like that that we're not thinking of besides Moreau?
Yeah, I think they certainly want to add a veteran tight end, but still keep an eye on running back. There was a reason they went after Samaje Perine. They were reportedly interested in Jamal Williams. Great pass blocking backs. There's not a ton out there now, but I would be surprised if they don't bring in a proven pass blocker. Regardless of Mixon's future, regardless of the draft, just makes sense to me that they do that. And maybe they trust Travion Williams to do it. I would be surprised if it's that cut and dry. And then the other spot is cornerback. Does Eli Apple return? He's still out there. That market is shaping up for him to be, another 1-year deal type guy. We'll see if that's the route they go. I could certainly see them re-signing another one of their own and bringing him back. So, I think they'll add some pieces.
For my money, though, and I keep getting back to this, and look, you can't be perfect everywhere, but, I mean, you can cover up a lot of holes on the back end if you can get after the quarterback. And that was a major shortcoming of this team last year. And I don't know if there's that kind of guy out there or,
the guy I would want? The guy I would want, and they're just anti over 30 at this stage. They've just had bad luck with those guys, so they just kind of stay away from it, which doesn't surprise me much. But Calais Campbell visited the Falcons yesterday, and you're talking about a 6'8" monster that can just play. He's 36, but he can play on the interior of that defensive line. He won't cost a lot, and I know they're spending a lot of money on that defensive line already, but if you could get him, I think he could make a big play or two in a playoff game and be a difference maker. And that's what you're talking about.
And a great leader. Well-liked wherever he's been, right? I mean, this would be a perfect locker room. That's a great name. That's a perfect locker room fit for what they're looking for around here because he is top shelf on the field and off the field. All right, James, we thank you as always for your generous time. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks again.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. James Rapien, we thank him so much. He brings incredible insight